This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Do not be afraid. We are now in control of what you hear.
1, 2, 3, testing.
A journey to the far reaches of knowledge and the unknown.
I can't believe I just saw that.
From aliens to angels, conspiracies to cover-ups.
One soul and
Preeminent power.
From extraterrestrials to exposing the truth.
I'll try to explain as much as I can.
You're listening to Planet X.
You're listening to Planet X.
Planet X.
Planet X Live on the People's Voice.
Hello everybody, joining me today is a wonderful chap, a co-presenter of mine, Tony Topping. Tony Topping has had paranormal experiences since the age of 2, which eventually escalated in 1996. Media interest in Tony began, as he describes it, because of his own experiences of very deep knowledge of matters of high strangeness, all based upon his own personal events. His work covers UFOs, mind control, conspiracy, espionage, and the psychic spy operations of the US and Russia during the Cold War. He's also been a contributor for various major broadcasters here in the UK, from ITV to Channel 4 and Channel 5, BBC local and national news channels. Finally, Tony has his own blogspot where you can find him, and that's on tonytopping.wordpress.com. Welcome, Tony.
Yeah,
to
well, you
the
did.
Show.
Welcome. Good evening, AM. You did pretty well there, but forgot to mention the YouTube channel.
Oh, mate, please go ahead and tell us about the YouTube channel.
It's Tony Ops UFO. If you go onto YouTube, just put my name in, Tony Topping, and you'll see there all kinds of clips and YouTube interviews that I've done over the years, including the UFO footage that started in 1999 that triggered the most craziest events that are still going on today.
Tony, let's just talk about this title, because I think this sums you up. But it's Tony Topping, UFO Encounters and Mind Control, where espionage meets high strangeness.
That's right. Yeah, it's not. I think the truth is actually stranger than fiction, really, and certainly the world of UFOs and the world of interaction with aliens, and my phone ringing in the background.
Okay, switch it off.
Oh my days! Sorry about that. Does that ruin the recording? Can you?
No, it doesn't. We're not stopping, mate. It's quite all right.
It's all raw, is it? That's excellent. Sorry about that. That's my lovely lady friend just calling me. Yeah, where was I, honey? So UFOs, paranormal espionage, where the truth and science fiction meet. It's where the truth is actually stranger than fiction, and that's the situation that we've got going on here, where the truth is stranger than science fiction. You'll see a lot of people writing about UFOs. You'll see a lot of people going on about it. You'll see major UFO research organisations. One guy springs to mind in particular. I note them that because harassment has not happened to him during the course of his studies, it hasn't happened to me. But they won't say that. They'll just go, oh, well, it never happened to us. But they won't get involved in what you've lived through with them. And what we're dealing with is a very unaccountable, nefarious secret police force who enforce the kind of like the silence of this situation that's going on, the fact that we're having off-world visitation, and the fact that the UFOs do actually exist. There is an unaccountable element out there that's causing a bit of a lot of mayhem. They impacted on my life after the UFO came in 1999, and this UFO actually illuminated a TV antenna. I'm afraid the canary's going to get louder, AM, and we might not be able to stop him, bless him, because when I speak, he goes bananas.
Right, Tony, just let me literally just stop you there, mate. I'll just pause.
This is Planet X.
So please carry on. We've sorted the canary in the background.
It might interrupt us again, AM. But basically, the gist of it is that we've got a situation, as I was saying, where we've got a secret police. You could describe it as a secret police that is accountable to nobody, that does its own thing. And in 1999, this UFO came in over my house. It illuminated a television antenna, and I was filmed by unmarked helicopters. I was stalked. This is all coming out in very briefly anyway. There'll probably be a 15 15-minute thing on Channel 4 in July where they're going to come and well, they filmed me actually. So that'll all be explained on Channel 4. It was the first time ever that I've walked through a television crew, walked them through what happened in the pub, walked them through the events surrounding the helicopter. Where what happened was I was walking home during the events of the UFOs coming in over my house, and this helicopter just appeared from nowhere.
And where was this, Tony?
This was on a place called Bawtry Road, and it came in from literally nowhere on a canal bridge.
And that's in Derbyshire.
That's in Selby, North Yorkshire, near York,
me.
the number 2 hotspot in the UK. And what happened was the thing just appeared from nowhere, and it was green in colour, and it was just ominous, hovering away, looking at me. And then it shifted around to a road junction and hovered there. It was at that point that I got the camcorder ready, and as soon as I started to film it, commenced filming it on the road junction, he knew. Obviously, there was breaking air rigs, so he moved. And there was cars peeping, and there was fishermen on the riverbank playing holy hell about this. My story will not change, and it never has done in the past 14 years of these events. My story is still the same right the way through. It will never alter, because that's exactly what happened. And it's like something out of a spy movie, hence some people calling me the paranormal Jason Bourne, because in the Ludlam novels, Jason Bourne was exposed to mind control under something called the MK Ultra, which is actually existed, documented. He was trying to find his identity. The situation is currently occurring, whereby with myself in one of the. I'm using Jason Bourne, by the way, as a metaphor. The Bourne trilogy. I'm not Jason Bourne. We don't want to go down this route. Well, is he a crazy fantasist, as some ignorant people?
Well, you've had lots of things thrown at you. It's great that it's great. Listen, it's great you can respond like this, because that's what we want. You know, we want to hear all this stuff.
What is surprising, AM, is the fantasist emails I get about people who pretend that they work for the government and pretend they know what's happening with me, and only I know my experiences and what's actually going on. I'm wired, as it were. I just know it's not called psychic espionage for nothing. I can see what's going on. So, but they pretend that they know. But that's immaterial. So, what I'm trying to get at is the following metaphor. Really, is that we've got Jason Bourne, and we've got the third trilogy, which was the Bourne Ultimatum, where a Guardian journalist revealed. This is where I'm getting into a dangerous area now, and it's dangerous. But anyway,
do you mean in present day when you say where you're getting into a dangerous
area? Yes, it is absolutely. It's dangerous. It's absolutely dangerous, because the last thing the people who targeted me, the format goes, you don't know what you're messing with. The format goes, shut your mouth. The format will then go, oh dear, we've exposed ourselves. The format will then go, security lockdown. They don't do ethics. They don't do apology. They're just utterly ruthless. And the thing was, in the Jason Bourne, in the third trilogy, the Bourne Ultimatum, the Guardian journalist discovers Operation Blackbriar, which was to do with mind control. And there's the dramatic scene on Waterloo Station where one of the corrupt CIA guys has got a whole surveillance team on him. I had a surveillance team. I was under surveillance myself. And this is real life. And the thing is, AM, is what you see in that film is actually when they're after the journalist on Waterloo Bridge for uncovering this, what you're seeing in that film is the mindset. The director, Paul Greengrass, captures the mindset beautifully of them, a mindset that I was completely unprepared for, a barbaric regime that has its own secrecy empire in a democratic place in the UK. Hugely controversial of me to say this, but it has its own secrecy empire. And, admirals, top admirals, Admiral Peter Norton, Secretary General to NATO, he knew that he was shut out of this. They're there, they're present. And so what was happening is that there's kind of like with me over the years, I published an article on the internet called My Private War with Covert Interests. Mm-hmm. And it goes into some detail about what they did to me in a Blackbriar style operation. So my trying to find my identity is who are they, why were they doing it? The why is constantly eluding. The who is a possible. So we're not too sure as to who. We're not too sure as to why, but we have very rough guesses that lead to a picture being painted. So it was quite typical of me to be awoken every hour on the hour by this remote mind technology.
Tony, before you tell us, and I do want you to tell our listeners about this, because it's just horrendous what
it is.
And I want you to tell us about the detail of that. But let's just pause for a moment and look at Tony Topping the man, and let's go back to the very, very beginning of your conscious memory in terms of awareness from the age of 2 of having had paranormal experiences. I'd like for you to tell us about that
yes.
first of all, so we can kind of. I'd like people to understand why it is perhaps that you are somehow getting this, as opposed to say the guy next to you or the guy, the woman next to you.
This is why it's an identity that similar to a born identity issue, because you don't know why. You're constantly asking why, and there are people out there who know. There are people out there who know why, but they're keeping quiet. And I know this for a fact. There are people out there in the big wide world who know why, or I wouldn't have been targeted. They knew in advance why. They were targeting me because they knew this UFO had come over. They were expecting it, you see. So
let's go back to your paranormal experiences to begin with, because that's very interesting. From when you could recall these from the age of 2. Tell us about that.
Well, what happens with me is I have precise visual recall of people, places, and memories of what people say, almost visual, absolutely precise recollection. And this is, I understand from what a friend has said, that this is due to very higher IQ. You wouldn't think so, the way I manage things at times. But
Stop it.
but it is due to, I understand it's due to higher brain functioning. Now, the thing is I even remember being born. I even remember being in the hospital and bouncing around on the hospital bed and seeing the nurse coming toward me. Vivid recollection of that. So at the age of 2, I've got something walk through a wall.
Tell us about that.
Well, what it is, it's deeply esoteric. And what happened was, we'll just call them shapes. Okay. They walked through a wall, literally just walked through a wall. Now, my father didn't see them. The relationship I had with my father was very difficult. But at that time, I was 2 years of age. I have precise visual recall of me screaming my head off because I was learning to talk. And, oh, Lord, and trying to I bit my tongue and I was bleeding with it. And my father's going, there's nothing there. And he lifts me into the cot and I'm screaming my bloody head off. And I can't understand, well, at that age, why I'm having these experiences. Sure. And then what would happen is I'd have these very bizarre incidents of strange dreams, constant dreams that were very, very... very bizarre. I mean, at the age of 8, I was awoken from sinister laughter in my bedroom at the age of 8. At the age of 9, 10, my father was a very powerful psychic. He would actually, if I was naughty, and people, actually, I miss this AM, and you'd probably reflect on this, and other people have. What would happen with me is if I was naughty, he'd just knock me out on the bed with a headache.
Oh, and no, I can understand,
People would comment on how barbaric that is. At the age of 8, he was barbaric. Yeah, he was that sort of man, really. I don't really, anyway, long story.
But that was, at the time, Tony, that was your norm.
It was my love. So that's what would happen. I mean, I know my father on one occasion he did. It was so odd, but my mother had been involved with something. I can't precise because I'm involved with a mainstream broadcaster. I'm very careful what I say with things because I cannot trust the press, cannot trust the mainstream media. So sure. I'm just careful to protect the innocent. But basically, a situation happened to a family member, and my father said that he hoped that in the process of the people and what they did, he hoped that their business premises burnt down. And I remember him closing his eyes in the living room. Luckily, the business premises were vacant, but were still owned by the firm concerned. The boiler room blew up. That was on a Tuesday evening. I was 9 at the time. So, but yet my father could heal cats. I've seen him bring a cat back from the dead. A woman crying with neuralgia pain walks into the house and he heals her in about 3 minutes, takes the pain away. So he was a tyrant, yet he was a healer. And so this kind of, I do not profess to be psychic, actually. I do say that I've had extreme paranormal experiences. I've been stalked by very strange forces because of that. And that's me in a nutshell. So the why is constantly eluding. It's like having a deck of cards. You have a deck of cards, you hold them, and everybody else knows the deck you're holding, but you're the last one to know. And that's the situation with it, you know?
That's very, very complex and disturbing for most people. And I do admire how you've embraced this stuff with what's gone on in your life, because you kind of don't have a choice, really, do you?
Nope.
you either have to go with this or you do go down you go completely insane.
You do, and the thing is that the sanity issue is constantly on a knife edge with it, because if I was to tell you of what happened, let's say the other evening, it would be too disturbing for your listeners and too.
Bring it on, Tony. This is what the People's Voice is all about, because
it is.
You know, we're not frightened to allow this stuff to come out.
Yeah, well, you see what you've got there is you've got a situation that is deeply problematic. But really, if I was to go into it now, we'd be at the wrong stage of the interview. Really.
Okay, well, we can refer back to it. Yeah.
It would perhaps be out of sync. But what I use is kind of like the current films that we see in the pictures. Let us see now. Inception, the film Inception, for example. So we've got Inception, the Bourne films, The Matrix, for example, are all very useful metaphors for you to use. If you can imagine, the film Inception, where they're in a dream landscape.
Yeah.
If you can imagine that dream landscape is actually correct and it's got non-locality, it doesn't move like our time or space.
Yes.
And you've got other beings interacting within that locality. That is roughly what you're on the receiving end of, but you've still no idea why. And you'll find that 9 times out of 10, people recently, there was a Channel 4 thing called Confessions of an Alien Abductee. And one of the guys who was responsible for the remote viewing program in the US, Ingo Swann, there's another incredible man I'll talk about called Alexei Savin, who was his Russian counterpart, and he was absolutely incredible. Ingo Swann reached the conclusion that perhaps some human beings were actually having walk-ins. Now, there are crazy bastards out there, who would actually then conclude that I'm some sort of alien.
You've had a lot chucked at you.
I've had a lot chucked at me, but I'm talking about military psychos who don't understand quite what's going on and have got weapons and all sorts at their disposal, but still can't grasp what's going on. Hence the famous NASA footage of the UFO coming in near the space shuttle and the laser beam firing at it from Pine Gap, Australia, and the thing moving quicker than the laser on the NASA footage. And you've got this situation, as Dr. Stephen Greer said, of agencies and government not quite knowing what's going on, but each doing their own little thing. And then as the political party in India, the BJP, I think it is, they indicated a few years back that if they were elected into power, they would disclose the UFO phenomenon, because it is protected and guarded by an international cabal of secrecy. So that international cabal of secrecy does careth not who it targets or why they've targeted. And I assure you that I have been targeted with remote mind control technology. But that none of this happened, That all began in 1999. But before then, if you can imagine me growing back into sync with things,
yes.
we were a teenager. I was quite a troubled teenager, and it could be argued then we've got the classic thing that comes in from the Dr. Chris French camp that because you had emotional troubles, therefore this is you switch off from daily living.
Tony, for our non-UK listeners, please tell us who. What Dr. Chris French represents. He debunks everything, doesn't he?
He does debunk everything, but the man's an absolute pussycat. I actually understand that he even had a paranormal experience years ago that he couldn't quite comprehend, involving a cat, so people tell me. I've no idea. Actually, he's a pussycat.
Okay, but just for non-UK listeners, he's the chap that the mainstream media, if you get somebody on, he'll be the chap that comes along and said, no, this happened. It's just an illusion, it's an hallucination, etc.
That's absolutely right. And I'm the guy's guy. I've got claim to fame on going on this morning, ITV this morning, and getting him to admit that aliens existed, that he actually believed that aliens did in fact exist. And I even looked back at him and said, good God, that's amazing. I didn't think you'd come out with that. And I said, oh, no, I think there could be a probability, and he's nodding his head. And, it's absolutely unbelievable. I think the worst person that you've got to watch out for, if I wouldn't be so bold, is Nick Pope. Chris French is kind of like, and I'm not saying Chris French is an angel, but Nick Pope is certainly a man who raises my hackles with the way he carries on with things. Recently criticising one researcher for being homeless in an article, the leading fracking guy, Ian Crane.
What's this about somebody being...
Yeah, it was a few weeks back where, Ian Crane laughed it off because Ian Crane is a smart guy.
Well, just because he was homeless or something?
Ian was looking for another apartment, and
okay, let's move on. This is silly. This is silly. Let's give that any energy anyway.
Don't get any energy. So, but what you've got to do with Nick Pope, for example, there was an incident with me on TalkSport for listeners for the People's Voice. There was an incident with me on TalkSport. I did a lot of work for the radio station TalkSport regarding UFOs.
That's a national
radio station, that's right. And what would happen was, on this particular evening, they were going to cover the story of Alec Newald, which was a man who was going down the road in New Zealand in his car, getting divorced. His life was just a mess. Next minute he knows, 10 days later, he's about 20 miles from where he should be, and it's 10 days later and he's no idea where he's been. Right. And this is in a book called Co-Evolution. And what would happen then was he then received harassment. He got a knock on the door from what he claims in the book to be the Australian Defence Department and the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House, who, and I can't verify this, who I understand are involved in monitoring UFO researchers, but I can't verify that information, and it would certainly, it may or may not be correct. But the thing is, and you wouldn't think so, would you, the kind of organisations that are monitoring, but seemingly they wanted to confiscate his car, because the car had been subjected to high electrical voltage. According to the book, Alec thought he'd had a car accident and he had these beings approach him that looked like ghosts. They weren't ghosts, they were actually ETs from another dimension. But as Alec Newald said, there's a clip of Alec talking in a rare radio interview about his harassment ordeal, where he said that these people turned up and they were not very nice, and they're not AM. They're not very nice at all. Now, what is interesting is he gave a kind of like a 3-minute spiel about this, and I thought, well, this is very good. TalkSport are going to really do this. They're going to go for it. And they played the clip. Next minute, I know, Nick Pope just absolutely debunks it, along with this American woman. They just completely debunk it out of all. He's a Walter Mitty. It's on my YouTube site, happened a few years ago. He works for MI6. Nobody does that. And Nick Pope even commented and said, nobody does that in the intelligence services. That doesn't happen. Well, it does happen. It certainly does happen. I know I've had nearly 12 years of it. And, it does happen. There are people who are out there who are in a compartmentalized secrecy castle. There are people out there who are doing this. Yeah. That's what goes on. You've even, got the precise infrastructure to even pull it off. You could have a parliamentary inquiry. The heads of our intelligence services sat there, and they probably wouldn't have a clue what's going on above them. But do you know what I'm saying?
Well, it's meant to be like that.
And it's meant to be like that. Of course it's meant to be like that. And you've got the National Security Agency as well who are involved. You see, and what is interesting about Edward Snowden is that Edward Snowden had passed information on about the mass surveillance of people via the internet and email. And that's interesting. But what I've experienced is the next level, which is advanced technological surveillance of the individual. Which is what I've experienced. And
Tony, this, I want people to hear about your story, because let's face it now, let's get real about this. This has been going on for a long, long time, and it's always been in the past. It's for the tinfoil hat brigade.
Yes.
And that is. It's absolutely not true that the most appalling things have happened to people. Now, you have a first-hand witness account of this.
Yes, I do.
Let's hear about this. Come on, let's get it on the table.
Well, as you say on my, there's an audio version of it, of my covert war against private interest. But commonly what would happen is I began to get stalked by these lunatics, and that is all you can describe them as, absolute bloody lunatics who seem to have a little bit of knowledge and power but haven't got the full picture. They can't have the full picture of what they want, and that full picture has also been denied to them as well. So what you have is a situation that happened to me where, for example, and it's in the public domain, and what is interesting is the Channel 4 programme that will be broadcasting in June or July about all this. What I'm not telling the presenter and what I'm saying to you will contrast very sharply.
Okay.
So what happened is, basically, I was being followed. When the UFO came in and the unmarked helicopter, I started getting strange phone calls. It was common of this man, because it was an individual, it was common of this first time. It's taken me 10 years to wake up. And just before I go into that, the reason why I woke up, was because I saw a clip of a woman who was 58 on YouTube, and she'd been whacked by mind control. And she was suffering, and I just snapped. Everything that had happened to me, everything that had gone on, I just awoke. I just suddenly awoke. This boiling inner rage about what had happened to me was present. And so what was going on quite routinely was this technology, this remote mind control delivery, was being deployed. The Russians call it psychotronic terrorism, which is exactly what it is. It is a form of terrorism. It is banned by the EU. In fact, under the Patriot Act of the United States, it's banned by them as well. It's an act of terrorism. But when it gets to this game, anything goes with these people. They're not interested in the law. They're not interested in that. They do what the hell they like, and they can even warn off governments. They can just say we're not having that, and because they've got the secrecy empire. So routinely, what would happen? I think the first incident happened in January 2001. Really, I was getting phone calls. I knew I was being stalked. But what they were routinely doing is they were waking me up to go to the toilet. They were actually, and that is absolutely horrendous. And what you've got is the involuntary muscular movement and the sound effect that goes with it to just wake you up. Right. And what you're doing is you're going to the toilet. You find the urge to go to the loo, but they've woke you up to do it.
So your sleep pattern is going to be broken. That's
absolutely it is. And this is still continuing with it as well. With it, because I can't say it's them. I've got to say that it is it. We don't know what it is that's doing it now. But at the time, it was them. Excuse me. And what happened was. I was stalked by.
Tony, just pull a tiny wee bit from your mic. Just pull back a tiny bit. Yeah. Lovely, nice and clear. Go ahead, mate.
So what was happening there is we had a situation where this man, who I believe is actually responsible for the operation concerned against me, and it's the first time really I've spoken out against him this year. We've even got a photo fit on my website of him. It's a spitting image of him as well. It's beautiful. But basically what was happening was this man was responsible for waking me up to go to the loo. I was hearing him in my head. I was hearing all sorts going on because he was deploying technology of an advanced nature. The helicopter that came over, it wasn't filming. We checked it with Jane's Defence. I checked it with Jane's Defence Weekly. That helicopter is an unmarked military special forces helicopter, and it had domes underneath it. Well, that's because he or them were calibrating. He or them were actually measuring. They were analysing. They were measuring. That's precisely what they were doing. It was a green unmarked military helo, and that's precisely what it was doing. Yeah. So what was then happening was he was waking me up to go to the loo on a regular basis. Now this terrorist would then. He then followed me into a pub one particular evening. And what is interesting is when I walked past him in the pub, he walked into the pub and he ordered a glass of Coke with a woman. And I kept constantly seeing this man in dreams and in sleep, and he kept coming into this environment in my head, and I could see him. And he walked in. It was him, literally him. He walked in. He ordered a glass of Coke. Now, so he orders a glass of Coke, which means he's got a bank account. He walked in holding car keys in his hands, which means he's got access to a vehicle. He knew how to order a glass of Coke, which definitely rules out the fact that he was from the planet Zog. He had money in his hand, so he'd got a bank account. He'd come from somewhere. He'd come from location A to location B where I was. That means he drove a vehicle. That means that when he drove a vehicle, he must have security clearance. It also means not only that he applies the letter of the law. As soon as he walked into that area, he was under common law. He was under the law of the land. Well, he's under the maritime law, but that's another story, isn't he? But sure. Basically, what happened then was that he then took up position against a pillar with his arms folded. And I have precise memory of me walking past him, and he's saying those immortal words, "I see he's off to the toilet again."
And he didn't utter those words, you heard them?
Oh, he uttered them, he said them. He literally said them to the woman he was with, "I see he's off to the toilet again." So he doesn't say to you, "I'm getting the mindset." He doesn't say...
No, I get it, mate. I get it.
Yeah, I'm sure the listeners just get into the mindset of these. He doesn't say, "Shut up." He doesn't say, "Stop what you're doing. Keep away from this information." He says, "I see he's off to the toilet again."
He's pinpointing exactly.
He's establishing control.
Confirmation, isn't it?
Yeah, he's establishing control. He's letting us know he's the biggest cock in the garden. He's doing his thing, And the problem I have with it, AM, is the fact that what would I have done if he'd have followed me in? You see, that's the shocking thing, is that you're not trained. A person like me is not trained to cope with that kind of mindset coming at you. No. What was he doing there? What was he gonna do? That's the big question now that I've awoken.
And what continued after this? Because things didn't stop here, did they?
Oh, no, certainly not. Because what continued after this is that the woman in question, as I was talking about this, the woman in question looked back in a mirror at me, which was so odd, and tilted her head and said the words, "Why doesn't Tony contact us?" Those were her words.
Very, very sinister, Tony.
It is, isn't it? But you see, it is. It's extremely sinister. Why doesn't Tony contact us? And then he kind of like walked across her with car keys, because he was in a vehicle, and he said, "I don't know. Come on, let's go." And he seemed disturbed. He seemed on edge. I didn't feel right. The situation he'd come to do didn't feel right, so he must have aborted it. But what was he going to do, Am? See, that was the thing. What was he going to do?
And you know, the fact that you're not responding in the way in which you're supposed to be responding.
That's correct.
You know, that throws the whole thing out of kilter, doesn't it?
Because I've sworn then. I don't know whether we're allowed to swear on the people.
No, we're not, but carry on.
Yeah, but it really screws the wheels start to come off for our friend Gerald. I call him Gerald because
that's what you call him, okay?
Yeah, because he reminds me of a character in the film Smoking Aces, who and oddly enough, by a strange twist of irony, that character in the film Smoking Aces was taken out by the Special Air Service. The Special Air Service arrested him in the film as part of his biography, it would appear. So isn't that ironic? Because but
Tony, just pull back from your mic a tad, mate. It's just distorting a tad. Go on, I'm fascinating. So what year is this? This is 2000.
So we're talking that was 2000, roughly about 2000 to 2001. And then what would happen then is that in about 2001, he decided to test his super secret mind control gizmo on me. And what he then did is around about 3 or 4 in the morning, he ran a routine simulation of some description, because this seems to be mind control merged with dream warfare of some description. Okay. So what they're actually doing is they're calibrating and testing a very top secret lethal weapon. I would suggest. Right. But there's a connection with the unidentified flying objects here. But we'll just stay with what they're doing. So what happened is that there was this scenario played out in front of me of what appeared to be being in my local church, and this man was in the simulation. He was in there, and he was what's the word I'm looking for? He was offering me wafer and wine. It's so bizarre.
Well, it's not to me, because that's very interesting. That's what they call the Eucharist, and that's to do with the drinking of blood and the eating of flesh.
It is.
Which, to me, anyway.
Good old Gerald, eh? Yeah, Good old Gerald. So what he then did is that he then offered me this wafer and wine, and what happens is that they get the mind tuned in such a way, AM, that you're relaxed and enjoying what's going on, even though they're about to absolutely do you in with it. Right. And that's extremely sinister. So what happens is that next minute I know, I start getting this stabbing effect in my head. And it's absolutely ferocious, and it's similar to something like Hitchcock's The Birds. Okay. You've got that oscillation effect going on, and you've got him stabbing you in the head, simulated, but it's real. The effect is real, while at the same time the technology is configured in such a way that you appear to be fascinated by what he's doing, and you appear to be actually strangely enjoying yourself.
God, that's a real mixture, real hash, isn't it?
It is, but you see that's what they're calibrating, they're testing, they're fiddling with this, they're fiddling with that. And I awoke from that thinking that I was not going to live the next night.
Well, I'm not surprised after experiencing
and that was in 2000. And bearing in mind that the situation was that I had a very responsible job to which I attended for a number of years. Yes. So I was coping with all those responsibilities as well. To have this goon squad do what they were doing. And what is, you've got to think like them as well, Am. It's very important, because if somebody out there within governments, within the world of secrecy, knows what they're doing, is aware that this technology has been deployed, you can guarantee, because this is how they work, that our man in Havana, Gerald, as I like to call him, and the people around him, will come up with some cock and bull story as to why they were doing what they were doing. Yeah. They'll try and justify what they were doing in some way to somebody somewhere, because that's how it works. You just have to be like them. You just have to understand them. And perhaps really, I always think when he came into the pub that evening that I was like a self-loading camera, like a camera taking thousands of shots of him, looking at him, analysing him. Perhaps I was calibrating him and he wasn't calibrating me.
That's interesting.
You see what I'm saying? Perhaps
yeah.
something else was watching his every move through me, because this is a very sacred thing that he's intruded on. He's intruded upon the human mind with this technology, and the human mind is not to be intruded on him.
We're hurtling towards that now, and this is something that I know that a lot of people who want to watch X Factor and don't want to think about anything else. They think this stuff is absolutely bonkers, and yet we are so, we're so close to this being overtly a part of our society now.
Yes, we are.
And yet these trial runs, these experiments, we know for a fact now.
Yes.
Because we have the ability, because so many people can talk about it now,
yes.
such as yourself, although I find your situation fascinating and very unique, just as you're unique. But when this began happening to you, there was nowhere for you to go. There was nobody for you to discuss this with.
Not at all.
And, I mean, things have moved on a little bit now. We know the scale of it happening. Yeah. But to people in general out there, this is no way. And yet society, we know, is hurtling towards just this form of suppression, invasive mind control, transhumanism. It's already happening, but to the majority of people out there, the people whom I'm really always hoping we get to, not people like you and I who know about this stuff. I'm not interested in people like you and I who know about this stuff, but the first-hand witness accounts of what happened to you. I really hope that people get to hear this, because to them it's all too far-fetched. It's the technology exists.
Well,
and it's come along in leaps and bounds probably since 2001.
You're correct on that one. It has come along leaps and bounds because they developed it. I was a test guinea pig. I mean, some of the bizarre stuff that was going on, what this man was up to, I zone on him, and he takes full responsibility and accountability for his actions, because I've zoned in on him, I've singled him out, and I woke up. It's taken me 14 years, but I've snapped, which means also that whatever he was doing is completely broken down. If they were trying to program me into some bizarre Manchurian candidate, it's not worked, it's failed. That means that the technology they've used has failed.
Well, that's terrific. That's terrific for you, and it's terrific for us, because I think personally, it's only a feeling. I can't prove it. I think they underestimated you, and that's just terrific, because
it is.
Worst thing they could have done really is target you, mate.
It is the worst thing they could have done in targeting me, because I never thought in a million years that my comprehension of what is the unknown would go beyond them. To the point where you reach a stage of spiritual kind of awakening with it. And that's precisely, I think, what it is. It's spiritual awakening within the context of what they're doing. Yeah. I think there's that thing, isn't there, that old Indian thing about what is covert will rise through the ground and become overt for all to see.
But they anticipated to break you and dismantle you
Still can. They still can. They cannot be underestimated in what they do. What is disgusting is the cover-up behind it and the secrecy of it, and the fact that, as you'll probably see, I will be the messenger who will get shot at. But there are people out there who knows what's going on. That's why I say it's like Jason Bourne and the Bourne Identity, where he collars people who he's worked with and says, why are they targeting me? What the hell's going on? And the woman's going, you don't remember, do you? And he goes, remember what? Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I
see why you're using it as a metaphor.
It's a metaphor that I'm using. But, for example, it was quite routine of them to simulate effects of me defecating my bed. It was quite routine for them to simulate effects of me urinating the bed. Testing technology. Just testing. The question, the security issue does arise, however, is who else are they testing it on? Where else is this technology going? What happens if it gets in the hands of Al-Qaeda? What happens if it gets in the hands of some organisation that, and I know...
Personally, mate, I think it's way above that even. I think the whole thing that exists.
I've dumbed it down slightly, but your listeners are quite educated. But yes, this technology has been developed for a very specific reason, and that reason, I've no wish to patronise your listeners, I totally agree with you. That reason is control. And how we control and who we control. That's why the technology has been developed. And obviously they're integrating it now subtly, so it goes into the minds of people. So you're going to get the mobile phone system in your head, is what they're gearing up for.
Bang on.
So that is actually what they're gearing up for. But people in this town where I live are incredibly switched on. I've got accountants, I've had plumbers, chief executives of company walk up to me and just go mutter, 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 this happened, mutter, mutter, mutter. Just thought I'd let you know, and off they wander about their daily business. But they're very switched on. But they won't say that they've looked at this in the mainstream public.
No, but this is something which I really do want to draw attention to. This is why it's very important that despite what you have experienced and suffered, because you have, you're not playing a violin here. But the truth of the matter is, appalling things did and have and continue. But certainly in the early days, Tony, how you didn't fragment and just completely lose it, mate. I mean, and not have the ability to come back together again in a newly formatted, assimilated you. It's that spiritual aspect of this.
It is, isn't it? Because you might see me in the headlines for all the wrong reasons had they kept it up. You may have seen me in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, but it didn't happen that way, because I think there's various component elements to it, and I think they're an interested party in my paranormal goings on. That's what they are. They're an interested party that's got resources that are not accountable.
They didn't bank on you opening your gobs publicly, Tony. And they didn't.
No, I don't think they did. I don't think he banked on me getting that lovely poster up of him as well. Because I'm as I say, if you come for me, I'll chase you into the sea. My army will just come after you. Equal. But I'm up against something. All I can do, is just fight my corner in a very weak way compared to them.
I don't think so, and I would hope, I'm not telling you what to do or think, but I would just hope that you would change that formula somehow, because I see it as anything but weak. What I think is...
that's very true. I know I gave a talk last night in Glastonbury. The people of Glastonbury, I gave a talk on psychic espionage last night, and the people of Glastonbury, the crowd I went to see, are very, very switched on indeed. And as one woman commented, what they were doing to me was a benchmark. They were possibly testing with this technology how far they could go with somebody.
Yeah.
As a reference marker, and it's really absolutely sinister to think that somebody out there has got a file on me, a photograph, for all the wrong reasons.
But Tony, this to me, what you describe as what happened to you, and again, it's just my opinion. This is the stuff that's above ground. I think this stuff has been going on. Let's say
it has,
below ground for decades, absolutely decades. So you're the guinea pig in inverted commas back then. You've had these experiences, you've been targeted, and they've got to try all these things out on you, and basically that's what they were doing. But I still think that the sophistication, that's a dreadful thing to describe it as being, but I think it is so sophisticated now.
Yes.
The technology.
Yes.
It's so frightening to think that that's what's out there for the public. It's already going on.
It is.
People don't think that things like their mobile phones and everything that says smart this and smart that, and every time there is the word smart, smart security in your home, smart car, forget it. It's just the whole thing is kit and caboodle, a part of that technology, which is becoming more overtly apparent in terms of its negative or nefarious suppression of human experiences or emotions, etc. But you know what, Tony? There are so many people who, I'm going to say it again, they will just not even want to listen to this stuff, and they're the people we need to be trying to reach, because this stuff is very, very real.
I think more and more people are subtly waking up. The British people cannot be underestimated in their waking up to this. There are people out there who quietly, as I say, the situation in pubs where you've got guys coming up to me and just saying, "I've looked at this, I've looked at that. What do you think?" And then they just go about their business as if nothing's happened.
But they're trusting you, aren't they? They're trusting you to tell you.
That's right, because people are more awake. And the thing with it, AM, as well, I think, is that higher ordered consciousness, the movement of higher ordered consciousness and evolvement is like the flow of water. No matter what they try to do, it will not stop. The evolution will not stop. I don't think they'll get away with it. I don't think they'll get away with what they plan to do with this technology.
I don't think they will, and I hope they won't, especially while there's breath in this vehicle I call my body. But, I might not see it turn around in my lifetime, but so what? I'm not going to sit back and say, oh, well, I wish I could have done something. I dedicate my life to what I do, and that's all I can do. I mean, that's the most important thing that I exist for at the moment, because there is nothing else to me more important than trying to allow other people to access the information about these things that are happening, because I might not see the results in my lifetime, but I don't believe that is that. I think they've seen this known about this incredible surge in human consciousness for eons, by the way. We're seeing that reflected in the behavior of our DNA. I'm not going to go into it. Everybody who's listening to this will understand all of that stuff. I think it's a huge panic to try and suppress and get all that wonderful kind of infinite consciousness and awareness of infinite consciousness within every cellular aspect of every being. I think it's a huge attempt to dumb it down, stop it, cut it off, and that's why they're just terrified of people waking up to themselves, let alone collectively what people can do, you know, what consciousness can do collectively.
Yes, this is absolutely right, and at another, I think at another level, what you've got is the kind of like the UFO alien component to that, which comes in quite easily, because if you're a dark consciousness that is not human controlling affairs, you're not going to go down the road of the War of the Worlds and zap everybody with laser beams. You're going to stay out the way. You're going to encamp yourself in the collective unconsciousness, and you're going to go down that route, which means that, you know, when you see these big ceremonies at Bohemian Grove and all that kind of thing, the men stood there have no idea what they're dealing with. No idea whatsoever what they're dealing with. However, on saying that, an element of the US government and the Russian government, and I think even the British government, actually know what they're dealing with. They do know. They discovered it.
I was talking to Mike Cleland,
yes,
a great guy, the other day, whom you are also going to be speaking with in the next few weeks, just a very short while away at the Exopolitics Extraterrestrial Communication Conference, which is on Saturday, June the 28th in Leeds. People can find out that information from exopoliticsgb.com. But briefly, we had a conversation after we had done our recording, and we were talking about all sorts of different things, and he, you know, he's coming over to the UK, and I was talking about the principle of food source, you know, and certainly to some mindsets, to some things that exist, the food source of misery, pain, anguish, fear, death, is just that. So even on land masses where there are conflicts, such as the Middle East, and for you know, going on in Ireland, on the land of Ireland itself, there is this constant emission of misery and suffering, and war brings these things, not just in major sort of sacred sites around the world. It can be as a person exists moment to moment, day to day, in the moment to moment existence. There are some things, entities, call them what you will, of a non-physical format alone, that is their way of getting food. That's what makes them grow. That's what makes them buzz. I mean, all of those things. And just because that stuff cannot be seen, or because on one frequency those entities can't be seen, doesn't mean they don't exist. So those people, you know, whizzing around at Bohemian Grove, getting dressed up, I think they're a much, much lower tier of those involved, of what's really, really going on. You know? Yes,
that's absolutely correct. As some of the more cutting-edge researchers in my field would say, the situation you're looking at is some form of non-human consciousness that has evolved over thousands of years and camped itself within a certain kind of zone of thinking around us that isn't present, that we don't actually physically see, and it's mentally ill. You know, when they're looking at this, some researchers at the cutting edge of all this would assess that they're actually that what we're looking at is they're suffering mental illness. These beings, they're actually suffering mental illness, and therefore they need ascension as much as we do. Very complex esoterically, I am very complex indeed what we're talking about. But that does appear to be present and correct on that. Yeah, definitely. From my assessment, spanning a lifetime of watching it. Definitely so. We've
got to go to a break, and as soon as we come back, we're going to be talking about this more. Tony Topping, thanks for joining us here. We'll get back soon.
Planet X.
Planet X Live on the People's Voice. Planet X Live on the People's Voice.
I'm talking to Tony Topping. Tony Topping has the blogspot tonytopping.wordpress.com. Tony, welcome back.
Hello.
That was just terrific. I really, really want you to continue with all of this stuff that you've had happen to you. But I want you to expand upon it and tell us about what you have learned in the wider picture of what's going on with other people.
Yes, of course.
Around the world. Tell us about that, because now people trust you, they come up to you, they talk to you. You've got a very public, visible profile now, so
that's right.
It helps. It helps.
It does. It does help. And what is strange about all that is a couple of the mainstream broadcasters, including TalkSport, have just let me have my say. But yet I have been gagged by the alternative media. At the time, a few years back, I was gagged by the alternative media, which I take exception to. But I won't mention who it was. But they censored me, and it was a show similar to the People's Voice. It's very well known, and he censored me. He removed it off the interview, and I was helping them to raise funds for their cause.
Did he ever talk to you about why he did that?
Well, it was just bizarre. It was all extremely bizarre. They got the worst photo of me drunk at my birthday and used that to upload. And what I was coming out with is similar to what I was coming out with now, but they didn't like that, so they just removed it with no explanation whatsoever. And I've not forgotten. I don't forget these things. And it was a disgusting way to treat a guest. Paul Joseph Watson, I think, was the presenter, and it was just an absolutely disgusting way to treat someone. And ever since then he's just done his own thing, I assume. But it's not a very pleasant way to treat a guest who's gone out of their way to help them to raise funds for their cause. So I had that incident go on of oppression by the alternative media, which is shocking, really, isn't it? That happened years back, but it is still shocking, I think, that can happen.
Well, I think when people are exploited, it's wrong and it's shocking.
Yeah, it is.
It goes on. It's awful.
And it goes on. But it was similar to what I was talking about here. There was no difference. But you're talking of. I think with me and my experiences, the clown squad that was targeting me were obviously aware of what was going on. They had a bigger picture than I did at the time. And a lot of the more astute people then ask, how did they know what was going on with you before you did? Not that is it or is it happening? The question was always, how did they know before you did what was happening? Because they knew. They definitely knew. They are aware of the existence that we are not alone. They are aware that we have off-world visitation going.
So is this where you think it's coming from, or is it in an effort to suppress that information?
It's an effort to suppress that information. It's probably a cabal of secrecy. It's an empire that Eisenhower said in his farewell address. The knowledgeable citizen must be alert to. That's precisely what the monster is. I know I was talking to Laura Eisenhower. She was a guest on my show, and she was talking to great-granddaughter, and she was commenting that President Eisenhower had a couple of heart attacks because he knew he had discovered what was going on. And it seems that on multiple fronts the human race appears to be, as you have said earlier, AM, there's a lot of trouble and effort and time gone into oppressing the consciousness. Our consciousness does indeed appear to be.
It's their number one agenda, Tony. They've got to shut it down.
It's an energy source. Now that is very strange when you hear that if you're not in this environment, what we're talking about, if you're not into this subject, that can be very strange. But at it's an experiential level, it's shocking to see that that's precisely what's going on. It is indeed an energetic source. And the thing is, what is interesting, just back to Alec Newald again, however.
Yeah, the Australian guy.
Yeah, because there's some very interesting stuff. When he was interacting with these alien beings that were interdimensional, they also commented that the Earth had been taken over by a particular force, but they had to be respected because it was a form of life.
Are we talking jinn here?
No, we're not. We're not
talking. You're talking about off-world.
I'm talking non-human entity. I'm talking.
Well, that's what jinn is, but you're talking off-planet, are you? I don't know. I want you to try and help me out.
Jinn. What is jinn? Before man, that was jinn. You could be right.
No. I'm not challenging you. I'm just curious. I'm trying to understand what it is you're referring to.
What I'm referring to is. In the 90s, this is part of my research, which is in the public domain. But what we're looking at is during the 1950s, before the real American remote viewing programs started.
Sure.
the Americans were looking under various operations to do. They were already studying it. They were already studying psychic spying before we went on the internet with what we see of Project Stargate and Ingo Swann and the remote viewing stuff. They were already looking at it for a specific reason, and that reason was, it seemed to be, and this is the excellent work of Nick Redfern, and he's pieced together part of a jigsaw. It doesn't form the whole picture, but it's part of it. But it seems that what happens is that there's a situation that occurred with the Americans whereby the UFOs were coming in, and there was no apparent reason for them appearing. And what they were happening was they were having a UFO air war. It's actually called the UFO air war of 1950. And what was happening was the Americans were shooting these UFOs down with multiple rocket salvos from their aircraft of the time, which was very advanced, and the UFOs were shooting back at them. And it was called the UFO air war. It is an interesting article in the New York Times and the Washington Post of the U.S. Army wishing to recruit anti-aircraft battery personnel and radar personnel. There was an increase in recruitment, and at that time Churchill said, "UFOs, what's going on?" And the Americans turned around and said to him, "Oh, nothing, Mr. Churchill, don't worry." Meanwhile, over the skies they were blasting away at each other. And so what formed, there was a specific agency formed that was wanting to know why these UFOs were appearing. Their remarkable and startling conclusion was, back to the ceremonies that we were talking about earlier, was that these ceremonies were triggering actual rips in space-time. And what was happening was that was when they were coming in.
Like these ceremonies at Bohemian Grove you're referring to. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. It's a source. It triggers a rip in space-time, and they were literally coming in from that. They concluded that was the root cause of the problem, these ceremonies and what was going on. They'd actually concluded, had this agency called the Collins Elite, that's exactly what was happening. And there's an interesting correlation here between Nick Redfern's work and the work of Linda Moulton Howe. In her book, Linda Moulton Howe, High Strange Volume 1, she was approached by people from the DIA, I think it was, who were discussing with her the fact that they'd come across something called non-human entities, or NHE, and the fact of the matter was that they were trying to understand them. They were trying to understand the physics of them and the mental components of them. And one of the key strategic things they were doing, according to this passage in Linda's book, was they were allowing the Americans to get the upper hand, but they were not. And this was a very interesting scenario that was going on, and they were studying closely the UK. I pronounce his surname, but they were looking at the quantum physics studies of David Bohm. David Bohm, I think is pronounced, Cambridge professor of quantum physics he was at the time. They were looking at his work very closely indeed, because it seemed to give answers. So you've got that going on there with Linda Howe, and then you've got the story of the Collins Elite you've got these two cross correlations of something going on within our landscape, and this in turn can get into other areas as well, because from my point of view this means that you've got a very ancient consciousness knocking about around us in other wavelengths that we cannot see.
Now I'm getting happier and happier with you referring to this, because I think if this ain't addressed, if this isn't looked at, if this isn't included, and again, I'm going to say this, Tony, I'm not, claiming to have it cracked, but if this is not addressed from the archons, right the way, whatever you want to call it, but this ancient record of this ancient consciousness, it has to be looked at.
Yes, it does, and the reason for that is because all kinds of situations can develop within mankind's future time frame. If you look at, we're going into some very advanced areas here, but if you look at time travel, it's
Bring it on, Tony.
It's the for example, what would a fine example of it is. How can I describe it? If we look at the nature of reality, there was a big incident on the internet a few years ago whereby the internet was being attacked. Nobody noticed, but it just slowed down slightly. But there was some sort of war between one faction and somebody somewhere, and they were all hacking into each other and causing multiple denial of service attacks. And the internet just slowed down slightly, but we didn't notice.
Okay. When was that approximately?
A few years ago, maybe 2 to 3 years ago.
Okay. recently then. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a fine example of the fact that all around us at the moment, there's nothing wrong. You're sat here, I'm sat here. The nature of reality appears absolutely fine, but it's when we start moving forward in time, when we start going forward in time, and we realise that the fact of the matter is, events start to happen. These little events, like for example Ukraine, which isn't a little event, but the kind of like the incident in the Ukraine is the prelude to something else.
With what's going on now? Do you mean?
With what's going on now. But what is absolutely fascinating with all this is it can cause multiple future timelines as well. So you've got an issue where time can suddenly our present future timeline on here is thundering to a point. But what I've discovered from my UFO encounters is, for some reason, I'm not quite sure why, our actions within this time frame now of where we are, me talking to you from point A to point B, seem to affect people in other worlds and other dimensions. Our actions in this world seem to affect other people. It's as if that this timeline in particular that we're on at the moment is a major thing, bigger than what we would think. But we don't see that. We just sat here normally and nothing appears to be happening.
Okay.
And the thing is that if you can alter the nature of that, then that's a serious business, which is why the Wingmakers website, many call it a hoax. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I've not heard of that. Tell us about that.
Wingmaker. Well, there's some very interesting things going on the Wingmaker site, which is meant to be a work of fiction. Perhaps the truth is stranger than fiction. But there's just an interesting... the jury's out, by the way. I'm even in two minds about it. But what happens is with the Wingmakers site, you've got... the story goes that an agency of the National Security Agency discovered in a cave 24 chambers that are in fact humanity from the 24th century, leaving behind information about who they are and what they were and all this kind of thing. And they managed to piece together something called they managed to understand the concept of time travel from this data that they'd got from us from the future, and they managed to understand other things as well. Now the thing with it is, I think with the issue of time travel and all that is, it's kind of like a subconscious, unconscious thing at the speed of thought. And in the environment I have witnessed, you can have multiple timelines going on, multiple events happening, multiple people coming in from different time frames, because it's a space-time continuum. It's not as we would think. The nature of reality is happening all the time.
Well, we think we're fixed, don't we? And we're not fixed. We're not fixed in time. And I think that what's happening with consciousness exploding the way it is, and accelerating to this infinite awareness of infinite consciousness.
Yes.
I believe that the realization that we do not have a fixed point within time is becoming more and more apparent, because we can go up, down, middle, side, forward, back.
Yes.
That is the realization.
It is.
That's humanity.
Yes.
And consciousness is hurtling towards, and I think that that's what they're trying to
If you can therefore imagine, a situation like, for example, with Alec Newworld or even myself, whereby you have interaction with UFOs, and behind the UFO is an intelligence, like similar, we'll use Alec Newworld as an example, but we can certainly say that when he was having interaction with these dimensional beings whose technology was advanced, they were in a different time. They were in a different dimension. They were, in fact, further forward in time than we were. If you were looking at timelines, if you stood them neck and neck, if you stood them kind of like, I don't know, if it was like a race track or a railway track, theirs would be longer than ours. Effectively, what Alec Newworld has done is travelled forward in time and back again, and then he's put back into three-dimensional reality what we're seeing now. Right. And that has a very strange paranormal effect around you, which is precisely what I'm hinting at, was one of the jigsaws I found when seeking my identity as to why I was having my experiences. It appears that you have a signature that's carried with you. You don't know where you've been, and you don't know why. The other thing as well about this is that abductees report missing time. Yeah. You can also have missing time in dream time. You can be in the middle of a dream and extracted and then put back in and have a feeling of missing time within that framework, which is an incredible scenario that happens. It's absolutely incredible. You've still no idea why this is happening. Absolutely no idea whatsoever why this is all going on.
Go on.
Yeah, just saying. And so, it's constantly alluding, but you're in the middle of a dream, AM. How can I describe it? You're in the middle of a dream, and within that dream, it has a time. You are actually, when you're dreaming, aware of time, or you seem to be aware that things are flowing. It could be quite a normal dream, but all of a sudden, it's as if you're just suddenly extracted and put back in again. And it's as if part of your mind goes, where did I go? The dream's moved on. Where am I? What the hell's happened? I seem to have missing time in the dream. It's just not right. I don't know. I've gone somewhere else and put back in. It's a very odd feeling, you know?
When did you begin to explore and practice remote viewing?
Well, remote viewing is something that's a very interesting thing, because I don't practice it enough. But by Christ, I know the subject backwards, way on, backwards, forwards, sideways on. I just know the subject inside out. And there, I'm a very good teacher at it. They say teachers can't, but I'm really, really good. There's no such word as can't, though, is there?
Tell me why somebody who is more psychically developed, let's say, or not developed, but I'm kind of thinking,
psychics aren't good remote viewers,
right? Because this is what fascinated me. I want you to tell us about that.
What it's all about is the fact.
Is this left brain, right brain stuff?
No, it's not. No, it's not. Okay. It's subconscious. What you're going down at? When I do my remote viewing evenings, which go down a storm with people, I cover lots of bases that the normal remote viewing stuff doesn't cover. This is because there's something when you're doing the art of decoding a remote viewing target is to understand signal from noise. Do you get that so far?
Yeah.
With myself, with my paranormal interactions with things that are not as they appear, signal from noise also applies. So I'm more developed in understanding what I'm seeing and what I'm not seeing as compared to somebody who may draw a remote viewing target and is good at drawing. That's where the difference probably lies with me, and that's probably why I'm also so unique. I never profess to be psychic. I'm trying to find answers to paranormal experiences that I've been having. Do you get where I'm coming from?
Oh, yeah, it's very well described, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So what you've got there is you've got the signal from noise situation occurring, and you've got a concept called analytical overlay, whereby the mind can generate all kinds of thoughts. We had a classic last night where a guy, the target was Glastonbury Tor. He drew it precisely, and what he drew, this was all in an evening. It's a crash course all in an evening, and people have loads of fun with it. He drew the bottom of the Tor, and then analytical overlay kicked in, and it ended up with him assuming that he was looking at a hill with the sun shining on it. So he put down the sun. So what he did is he didn't have the art of understanding what was noise. When he drew the sun, the sun, that was noise. The signal was the actual ancient folds in the Glastonbury Tor Hill, the ancient mounds he was looking at.
I understand.
You get that?
Yeah.
That was signal, but then noise came in, and he drew the sun, assuming it to be something. Now that's analytical overlay. That's known as. So what I had to teach myself, which is quite a mean feat, is when I was looking at information coming at me, because I'm somehow wired. It's crazy, I know, but I am. I had to understand what I was listening to. Is it signal or is it noise? And what would then happen is you'd build up a picture of signature of different things that was going on. Somebody who's passed over into the afterlife is different from something that's a very ancient entity. The two are different. The signature is different. This is the real world of seeing the paranormal and strange realities. And
but you're doing that, aren't you? From what I understand, by
right.
deploying a discipline of approach.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like it gets to the stage where you're getting whacked so heavily by them. I say by them because it's the scenario's somewhat changed, because this is kind of like a paranormal thing now, where you're getting whacked by something that is unknown. You begin to see its signature, and you begin to see its understanding, and you begin to see where it fits in the greater reality of things. You begin to actually separate signal from noise. That is truly what the remote viewing programs were possibly all about in the deep black area, when it went deep black, because you see on the internet the Stargate stuff. And what is equally fascinating is the guy Alexiou Savin, who Joseph McMonigal got me in contact with. And, the thing with Joseph McMonigal is he's a tremendous remote viewer. He was the US Army's #1 remote viewer. But he somehow gave me a big up and said, look, Tony is experienced. He may not be good at remote viewing, but he's experienced within paranormal and the research and all his experiences. And also I've been stalked as well, haven't I? So just to add to that. So what he put me in contact with was a guy called Alexiou Savin, who run the equivalent KGB remote viewing program under a unit called Troop 10,003. And what you've got the American psychic espionage programs, all in blazing lights. You've got this little website called newcosmology.com. It's the Russian remote viewing stuff. Just this little website. Everybody seems to ignore it, and there it is, staring you in the face. What they developed was a whole understanding of man in the cosmos and its energetic forces that interfere with it. At the height of the Cold War, they were doing this. This is the Russians that are doing this. And what was interesting is Alexei Yusavin recently spoke to Pravda, journalists at Pravda. And journalists at Pravda were asking him questions about his unit's UFO research, what they did. And what he did is he employed female remote viewers. He used women a lot because they seemingly were the best. And what the difference is, the Americans call them remote viewers, but the Russians call them information channel operators.
That's interesting.
So it's interesting. There's a different thing, and the Americans use a subconscious ideogram technique to decode a target, but the Russians use a brain tuning technique, which is mysterious. Nobody really knows about how they do it. I'm not too sure myself, actually. I'd love to know. I can't seem to, on the website, you can't seem to get to the bottom of the precise procedure of how they would remote view a target.
Yes.
But what is fascinating is these journalists are sat round him, and he's talking about his remote viewing research of extraterrestrials. Now, the Western press, if I was to be wheeled onto this morning and I came out with what he came out with, I'd be laughed off the sofa. But the journalists...
But if you don't mind me saying, Tony, it isn't exactly... the kind of magazine, television content.
Yeah, it is. I mean, oddly enough, this morning we're on the phone about 3 weeks ago, but they didn't want me on because obviously they don't want somebody who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, they just want to have a laugh at it and make it entertainment.
They even said, oh, we just want to laugh. Can you find? I actually found someone for them actually who would be entertaining. But once again, they didn't want him either because he obviously didn't want to be taken the mick out of, and rightly so. So they ended up wheeling on somebody. I don't know who she was. I never even saw it actually, but the situation. What was fascinating was the journalists at Pravda commented that they were very glad that he'd come out with this information because it's a very grey area. This is journalists, and I'm not saying Russia as a country has got a halo around its head, but I'm saying that the journalistic difference was incredible. And what Alexei Savin was saying was absolutely incredible regarding the interaction with UFOs. He was saying that his specialist unit discovered that 90% of the time when you're having interaction with the off-world intelligences, it will be female. And he's right. It is female. Very rare you'll see interaction with a male alien in the real life landscape of interacting with these things. It'll always be female. I remember seeing my first one when I was doing all this. I was awoken from sleep from her. I was sleeping and she was there.
What happened?
Yeah, well, this is it. You see, it was absolutely fascinating because it was 1998 before my journals began. I've got journals, that I'm now at the conference that's coming up. I will be talking about them. In fact, that's what my presentation is going to be centered around, but we'll go to that later. But basically, so 1998, I'm having the strange goings on even before the goon squad turned up. And what was happening was I had this bizarre scenario where we once again had this landscape environment that comes into the mind where you're dreaming, but you're in a reality.
Yeah.
It's simulated. They know what they're doing. They're smart people. And so what happened was I was in my old house in a place called Robert Street, and I was looking at my mother's old dressing table, and I remember there was this. I'm looking, thinking, oh, I'm back in Robert Street. Oh, and there's this woman tying back her hair, and I'm going, oh, she's tying back her hair, blonde hair. Look at that. There's a woman there tying back her hair. And she turns round and looks at me and just goes, how do I look? So she says, how do I look? And she was not human. And what was even more interesting was she was absolutely stunning. But she didn't look human, but she was stunning.
She didn't look human.
She didn't look human, but
she was stunning.
She was stunning. She looked pointed face, stunning green eyes. I remember the tone of her skin was incredible. The skin color, she glowed health, blonde hair. And she just said, how do I look? That's all she said. And I remember nearly dying of fright. I remember waking up frightened because I thought, what the hell was that? And you will get some smart ass going, oh, they speak fluent English. They speak fluent. What a fantasies. What a jackass. He says aliens speak fluent English. Yes, they do. They study language. They're advanced cultures. They've probably been part of us, they've probably developed us. So they know the landscape, they know us, they're aware of us. They probably even developed our musical language. So you see where we're going with this, but it's the actual shock of what she looked like that you'll never be prepared for. And there's all this on the internet about, well, we channel the aliens, or we do this and we do that. I think when you come face to face with them, you're never quite prepared for what they look. I wasn't quite prepared for what she looked like. And I've reason to believe that she was involved in the flyover over my house in 1999. I'm quite open with the fact that I, in my considered opinion, think that it was under intelligent control. It was a female pilot, and she was piloting the very UFO. You only need to look to the head of the Belgian Air Force or the head of the Peruvian Air Force, and they're quite open about the fact that their Air Force thinks that the off-world intelligences are using aircraft of advanced technology. You only need to look at the Belgium Triangle incident for that one, where the head of the Belgian Air Force said these things are not human. They're controlled by something that is off-world. So yeah. It's just fascinating how she was looking back at me.
What would you be using nowadays for yourself for purposes of remote viewing? I don't mean in a workshop scenario.
I use something called I use a little technique called look back ping. I call it, which
look
is something,
back. Say that
look
again.
back ping or look forward. But I call it look back ping, whereby awareness can become. This is really advanced stuff. Awareness. This is from my own experiences, and they're not necessarily everybody else's. It's the only way I've had to learn it all by myself.
Okay.
But whereby you will actually be able. You can develop your awareness in such a way whereby you'll get a 2-second to a 1-second burst of somebody, of what they're thinking or where they are. Right. Recently, a thing happened recently where a remote viewer who'd been involved with MI6, who'd written a book. She was trying to remote view the recent missing aeroplane incident.
Okay, that sounds like it's interesting, because I think some of this should have been put to use. Okay. Yeah,
okay. So we have to be tasteful as possible as this, but basically she was trying to locate the aircraft. Now, from what she tells me, and I don't know whether this is correct, because she doesn't like being interviewed, but from what she told me, she was getting inquiries from certain quarters about this, and she was having difficulty with it. So I kind of did my thing, and basically all I can describe it as is it's as if people talk to me. Okay. It's as if another element. Some would call it the subspace aspect. Others would call it the biophysical body. But in some cases, it can speak. I don't know. The quantum physics of it will be highly complex. The physics behind it, the biology behind the process would be complex. But out there in the big wide dreamscape ether will be the mind of that individual who, let us say, might be missing, and that individual you will actually reach out to them and ping them and go hello.
And that's what you mean by ping. I get you.
It's like pinging an IP address, but in fact pinging the mind. You're pinging subconsciously, and they'll come back at you and say, oh, hello, and you might go, did you do this? And they'll come back at you and go, oh, yes, I did this, this, and this. And that's roughly what happened. So, that's basically the gist of how my method works. I don't actually remote view targets. I don't do drawings of remote view, because I can't. I have difficulty drawing really. But what I can do is decode information and understand very complex situations within the paranormal and phenomena. I can seem to understand what's going on around me. When you come up I am face to face with a UFO that's chasing you in a farmer's field, which what happened to me when I was studying all this years ago. I mean, that was unbelievable, where I'm stood in a farmer's field and my camcorder goes wonky, and I look up to see a dot of light UFO, like the gunfight at the OK Corral it was, as I said. It stood looking at me in the farmer's field about 500 feet above the ground, just looking at me, staring at me. And you're thinking to yourself, why is this happening? And it started to heat up a certain area of my body, and then flew off at speed. And you're coming across this, and you need to understand why it's actually happening and what is going on. I think what is, on a larger grand scheme of things, what is happening is that, as Dr. Carla Turner, an alien abduction researcher, said, who sadly passed away, but she indicated that there was some sort of adjustment going on within the species biology of the human race that was training us to cope with this reality. So we could crawl, we could walk, we could run. Perhaps the next stage with us is we can crawl, we can walk, we can run, and understand these realities and protect ourselves to form a better future.
That's interesting.
Would be the precise interaction that's perhaps going on with these UFOs. They're part of us. They developed us, but they're also warning us as well. These UFOs are definitely warning us about what you said earlier, Em, I think, where you've got this scenario going on of these crazy situations building up, and they're absolutely warning us about it. They're very concerned about things nuclear.
I think since recorded time began, humanity's been hijacked. I see it as a program, I don't mean without feeling, without emotion. I just see that the whole thing has been hijacked. The program has been hijacked, and the program is limited where it shouldn't be. We should have complete access to the full, motherboard. I'm not a technically savvy person. I don't know what the best description of it is. Just before we move on from that, I've got to ask you, when you and this woman whom you talked about was also asked to look for the missing airline flight, the Malaysian airline flight, what differences did you both get, or what similarities did you both get?
I think in the interest of taste and decency, I have ethical issues about the matter. I won't talk about it.
Fair enough.
I assisted her. She was having difficulty. I got a look back as to what was going on, and a couple of days later they saw debris in the sea and started zoning in on it. But she was having noise issues with the debris. So what would happen is she'd zone in on the debris, and then analytical overlay would kick in. Analytical overlay means spurious thinking, basically, and she would then attempt to try and stabilize the situation, but she was actually seeing noise. It was very difficult indeed.
Was it distressing, do you think, for her?
It was. It became very distressing and very pressured for her.
The radio show that officially does not exist. This is Planet X. Planet X.
So let's get back to the Extraterrestrial Communication Conference, which is where you're going to be speaking in June 28th. Sorry, Saturday, June the 28th. You said that you're going to be referring to your journals. Tell us a bit about that. Something that you've not really talked about publicly before.
Yeah, well, it's interesting actually, because what is even more interesting, I think, about the journals, which will probably fascinate your listeners, is the fact that the journals show a man stumbling in the dark, which was myself, for about I think they go from something like the year 2000 to about 2007, and I'm very careful as to who I show them to, because it shows interaction within a subconscious realm that is not kind of part of us, but is, which I've been wired into. Because there's obviously something going on, and it's got all sorts of stuff in it about what was going on with the technology being deployed, and goes for many pages. But clearly, what I'm writing down, I am assuming a lot of things. I'm adding belief to what I think the unknown and these intelligences are about. Interesting. The other evening, then, that I was sat outside. I'm a radio ham. Licensed radio amateur. A few months ago, I was on VHF talking to my friend. One of these UFOs came over, dot of light thing, zoomed over the house. And I thought, oh, where's Dave gone? So I started trying to key the radio and talk to him. And he came back to me and said, where have you gone? And I went, what do you mean, where have you gone, mate? I've been here. And he said, no, you haven't. I've been calling you for 10 minutes. Where have you been? Oh. Do you see what I'm saying? So what happened is the thing comes over the house, and according to my friend, he'd been calling me for 10 minutes. To me, I'm just stood in the garden like we are now talking, and nothing's happened.
Tony, have you ever tried regression?
Yeah, well, I'm trained in that area, so regression would just be. I don't think would be any good to me, really.
In terms of recalling information, you don't.
The thing is that there's been trauma. There's been trauma happening with the mind control, and I think we'd have very nasty abreaction to repressed memories. So it's the shock of abreaction to anything that is, because believe me, that what they've done to me has been horrifying. So it's the shock of what something termed abreaction, where you get a nasty subconscious memory surface, causing like an hysteria within that person when they're under the trance, when they're relaxed under the trance. I know this because I studied it under Paul McKenna. Actually, I studied a bit of Erickson as well, and I studied a bit of Bandler and Grindler, and so I know my way around that. I don't think it would be any use to me. What is actually interesting the interesting change in taking the journals. This is what I'll be talking about at the conference, and I won't spoil it.
Tony, just pull back a tiny bit, mate.
Is that all right? Yeah.
Yep, much better. It was getting a bit distorted. Go on, mate.
What is fascinating is the fact that we've got these journals from 2000 to 2007, and then there's this big gap to 2014 because I just don't know what I'm looking at. So I've left it. And last week I returned to them. I actually returned to the journals and wrote down in precise detail that a UFO had come in over the house again. It had flashed and off. So what had happened is I was just sat in the garden round about 10 o'clock at night, and the UFO came in and it shone at a great light. It shone, not a great light, but it just shone and then went off like a car headlight and carried on its way. And what you'll sometimes get is you'll get two of them travelling in an opposite direction, or you'll get one of them appearing in three places at once. But you won't know, as I'm speaking to you now, in the background something else is probably happening that I'm not aware of. But what is interesting is what I wrote down and how the brain can decode information differently now to what I was doing back then. And it's as if, I don't know whether you've ever seen the film The Adjustment Bureau, have you?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, there's an interesting thing that happens because there's an ex-girlfriend of mine who's very switched on, and she had quite a shock when she was in a hotel, because the brain can sometimes go into a state of mind that it decodes three dimensions differently, and we end up seeing a different reality suddenly coming and out again. It'll only be for about 2 seconds or so,
right.
but some element of the brain is tuning differently. The Russians studied this extensively in their remote viewing projects, where it was the brain can be tuned to a different wavelength or frequency, and the optical nerve will decode differently, and that's what happened to me. When that, for the first time in years, that's what's significant, is that the UFO came in, but the optical data of what I was seeing around me, which was a backyard, trees, for a split second just went a bit different and then back on again. And that optical data would have information. It carried information to it. It looked different. It had it was a signature that it was them, and the signature is of them is that the drawings that they show you, or the symbols that they show you, are very, very kindergarten, very basic, but have a signature about them to identify them. I can't even put it into words. It's the style of drawing and symbolism. And what is actually happening is communication is actually happening at a very rudimentary level. With something that I don't quite understand yet. But they keep coming in, and they keep coming in, and they keep doing this. We're not sure the reason why. A few months back, they kept coming in over the house again, but I didn't write it down. But what was happening was they kept coming in, and what would happen is the UFO would come in from the right, and then it would fly to the left, and then it would reappear again. And this time, except as it reappeared, it was flying. I think it was flying from the right to the left, kind of like horizontally, and then it reappeared again, and it would go vertically, then disappear, come back the other way vertically, as if it was. And I'm thinking, what the bloody hell's it doing? And what it was doing, it was drawing something in the sky.
Oh, wow.
So it was drawing a key. It was a key shape. Is precisely what it was doing. It was doing the key. It was drawing a key. With the things that would open the lock, an actual key shape it was drawing. Now, at some level, I don't know why. This is the thing. I don't know why, because as soon as you add belief, AM, into what you're seeing, you're in trouble. You'll lose your mind if you do.
What do you mean if you lose your focus by allowing your mind to wander?
I went through a phase, as I eloquently explained to the Channel 4 people, whereby I became rather obsessed with filming them and assumed to know what they were.
UFOs, you mean? Yeah. Okay, I get you. Sorry, forgive me.
And I assumed to know them and assumed all kinds of things. And when you get down the role of you think you're being special and you think you're having visitation and you think you're a special individual and you're here to save the world, that's when you're going to get into trouble. Because there's an aspect to this that would indicate that they're not perfect. They're prone to making mistakes. Part of the intelligences that we see behind it all are quietly unhinged. Some of them are unhinged. It's a strange world out there. What is fascinating, it's like looking at wildlife on one. Right. It's like looking at a David Attenborough program where you're looking at a whole landscape of reality that we are not even aware of, or rather, we're not even aware of for some specific reason. But what is interesting, as I say, is the change in the journals, what I've written, and the way I'm seeing things and decoding information has changed dramatically. So it'll be interesting now to keep the journal in great detail as to what's coming over the house, what they're saying and what they're doing in greater detail. And anything that is spurious, I'll just chuck it out.
And I think without going into too much detail, it's lovely to be able to say what you're saying, because you don't want to reveal too much about what you're going to talk about at the Exopolitics GB conference. And it is about. Yeah. It's called the Extraterrestrial Communication Conference. That's the whole point. So
yes,
but you strike me as certainly one of the things that's changed. I'm not saying that you've not been spiritual, of course you have, but the element of spirituality that you are aware of now, or that you acknowledge, that's the word.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
You're embracing it far more, and I love how you're talking about that. I would, hope that the subject of consciousness comes into this area, this field of research to do with what's called extraterrestrial communication, etc. But I'm a great believer also in there's more to it than meets the eye. I'm not saying I've got anything cracked, but if we don't look at the subject of consciousness and the jinn and archons and everything else as well, we're never going to get anywhere. We're never going to.
No, we're not.
We're just going to, as I keep calling it, as another guest called it, excuse me, we're just going to keep hamster wheeling.
We are.
Around and around and around,
It's very true. When I leave my friend's house tonight and I walk down the street, down my usual route, a few months ago, one of these things followed me all the way home. There was no explanation as to why it was there, no explanation as to what it was, but it just followed me all the way home. It appeared over the houses near the police station, and it just followed me. It was like a car headlight, just permanently lit, and it just walked with me all the way home.
These days, how do you feel about that?
Well, these days now, what I'm doing is I'm listening to the slightest nuance from them. As I said to the Channel 4 guys, the other ones that I've been dealing with can come in a bit too close for comfort. And when you're looking at that, when you're dealing with them coming in too close for comfort, there is a risk that you're being exposed to a radiation field, a magnetic field, and it has happened where they have come in a bit too close for comfort. But what is most fascinating, AM, to observe from the years of research that I've been doing this, is the amazing fact of the matter that these dots of light that have been appearing quite often, they haven't possibly come to watch me. They've actually come to watch what I'm looking out for. So what we've got is a reality observing another reality. We had the bizarre incident years ago where the UFO, for example, that illuminated the TV antenna would have these luminous-type UFOs around it. And then these dots of light would turn up, and these luminous UFOs would chase them off.
Oh, I've heard about this.
Yeah, because you're looking at a reality that has probably created us, probably created the human race, and you're looking at this interaction going on. And I would suggest that the dot of light that you're seeing is possibly related to the Antarctica UFO situation. So you've got these jigsaws that begin to form a bigger picture of what is happening, and add that to the oppression, trouble, and time taken to oppress human consciousness, and you've got one big situation going on behind the scenes. That I think governments have a job understanding. Even I have a job understanding, for that matter. But I've had a lifetime of it. It seems to be my destiny to understand and make sense of it. So these are the fascinating things that happen with them. But as I say, what is significant is the way I'm looking at information with my journals now, and the fact that the first time ever in years when they flew over, it went a bit adjustment bureau, whereby the symbolism. So if I'm looking at a tree, that tree would actually there was a tree. There was a tree in the back garden. The UFO came in over. That tree just alters to look something different and comes back again into awareness very gently, but it alters into a symbol of communication and then back again for a split second. But it's not the tree that's been altered. It's actually probably the optic nerve, and what I'm seeing has just been slightly changed for a split second by them to communicate something and then off again. So that's how they work. They're not using radio waves. They're very clever. They're very smart.
How much of that change in the view of what you're looking at is something that you're able to access or do all the time anyway, but is being triggered or is being what's the word I'm trying to... It's being stimulated by
That's a very perceptive question. It's been stimulated. I cannot trigger it myself.
Okay, but you have the ability to, surely. We all...
I think you're right. It will, for example, I'm sat in a dark room at the moment. If I was to just relax probably a bit more and just switch a certain part of the brain or just relax a bit more, the chair might just warp into something else and off again. Okay,
because if for example, you took ayahuasca or...
Yes.
I don't know, a mind-altering state of your pituitary.
Geometric patterns. I would see geometric patterns.
Yeah. Okay.
Precise geometric patterns. But you see, I can't add any meaning to that. Yeah. I cannot assume I am from my situation currently. I cannot assume what they are. I don't know what's going on, so there's no point in even trying to attempt to say what's going on.
But that's healthy to me. You're not saying you got it cracked. I mean, even if you did, that's okay. It's your right.
Because they're acclimatizing. They're developing it. They're actually acclimatizing. Only the other morning, within sleepscape, as I call it, they came in. They came in again. And what happens is, you get these spectacular visions of UFOs within another reality framework. So you're asleep and you just get this spectacular mosaic of them coming in, UFOs. Wow. Bang! I forgot to write it down, and I need to. And anyway, they came in, and then they came out again. They said what they needed to say, revealed who they were and what I was looking at, and then stepped out again.
As quickly as that.
As quickly as that. And for the purposes of, after in view of what's happened to me, I'm going to deny the people who want to know that information. I'm going to continually deny it to them. So they're not going to get to know, because I'm going to keep it to myself on purpose.
Good.
To just literally, because they don't deserve to know. People like that who did what they did to me do not deserve to know this information. It's now in another realm. You deserve to know, but they certainly don't. And when I see you, I'll tell you all about it, what it was. Your listeners actually deserve to know as well. But I'm just angry at what's going on with it. But basically, what you're looking at is something similar to the woman who was tying back her hair. But what they do is they're very gentle with the communication. It's very kindergarten, the symbols and everything, because they're acclimatizing. Yes. And that's what it's about. When the conference is coming up there, the extraterrestrial communication conference, I'm going to be revealing information that people will have never seen or heard of before within the framework of all this.
Tony, just tell us, where can people get in touch with you, and how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, it's been a very deep conversation about what really goes on in the world of UFOs, and you can find out more about that at tonytopping.wordpress.com or tonytopping.co.uk.
And if people have sorry, Tony, say that again.
Tonytopping.co.uk, that's correct.
Okay, and if people have information that they want to pass on to you...
Yeah, the email address on that one is TonyOpsUFO, that's TonyOpsUFO @hotmail.com.
Well, Tony, it's been wonderful to talk to you. You're never short of something to say, and that's so refreshing. You're passionate about this field of work and everything that you do, and I'm delighted that you've been able to join us today. Thank you so much, Tony Topping, for joining us on Planet X Live. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, video.
This is Planet X. To everyone at the NSA, CIA, MI5 and GCHQ, we'd just like to say thanks for listening.
This is Planet X. Planet X.